Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again on Against All Enemies. This is your host, Rick Wilson. As always, I'm joined today by the great Scott Galloway, a brilliant thinker about a lot of big questions, including economic matters, including the role of young men and men in our society, including AI. And he's a guy who has been deeply experienced in entrepreneurship and capital growth in creating and founding companies and advising people on brands and branding. And so, Scott, I wanted to start out with a sort of big picture question. And it has to do with the AI stuff, because it's something that, while it's not like directly central to my immediate world, a lot of people keep asking me, like, how is AI going to change politics and communication and social stuff and culture? And in the same vein as, it's going to change business. I think you've said, like, business is going to change by people who know how to use AI rather than just the AI itself. What's your take on the broader social implications right now of where AI is and where it might be like a year from now?
We're going to need a bigger boat. So, by the way, I might be wrong here. I feel as if I understand AI better than 99% of people, and I don't understand AI. Look, it is. So right now, the use of AI that is having the most impact in the world is, I'm fairly certain that there are 5 or 6 comms people in the White House who are doing nothing but every day prompting ChatGPT and Claude with the following prompt: what announcement around tariffs or going after people will most likely do the least amount of medium and long-term damage while pushing the word Epstein out of the news cycle tomorrow? Because these things are so random. What was the latest one? He's going to pardon Diddy.
Yeah.
So to think he's not testing this stuff with AI, these comms around this stuff, is sort of, that is what I think is going on here. What to a certain extent, the Colbert Show is sort of a metaphor for what I think is going to happen with AI, and that is Stephen Colbert, $100 million or $120 million business pre-COVID, $60 million business now, costs $100 million, losing $40 million a year. And the thing that was staggering was that it is losing $40 million a year. And I think what's going to happen is the following: is Stephen Colbert is just going to move to podcasting, and he's going to go from 200 people to 6 or 8.
Yep.
And he'll use AI and new technologies to be just as culturally relevant. It'll be a smaller business. He'll make as much money, but you're going to see a huge destruction in employment. And if you think of a kind of AI adjacent example of kind of the employment destruction we might see in the short term, I think autonomous is going to go after what is the biggest job by number of actual jobs, and that is for non-college grads, and that's trucking.
Trucking drivers, yeah.
And in addition, if you think about his new AI manifesto, where he's basically said that AI can crawl all existing IP and not be liable for any royalties, that is nothing but a transfer of wealth from the creative communities to his buddies, Peter Thiel and the San Francisco tech community. So they're about to get even more wealthy, and there'll be even greater concentration of wealth because he's opted for AI over any sort of IP protection.
Right. It does raise the question, like, the value of creating IP, which you've done, which I've done, has always been about the shitty part of us, staring into a computer, writing things, figuring out how to make money on something, off an idea, a concept, a book, whether it's a new business or a book. And now you're right. It's like the vast majority of that IP, whether it's a book or a movie script or actually produced content or software, it's going to end up getting crawled and replicated and iterated on, and it's going to end up in Sam Altman, and Sundar Pichai and Peter Thiel's pockets a lot sooner than it will back to those creators that were the sort of origin story of its DNA, at least.
I feel like if you think of content is kind of, the chip is the means of production and the salsa is Brad Pitt or Rick Wilson coming up with a twist of phrase or sort of something creative that just feels human and differentiated. The means of production, excuse me one second. The means of production or the chip is about to dramatically shrink. I just saw the movie The Fantastic Four because I have a 14-year-old boy.
Uh-huh.
The credits, which he makes me suffer through to get to the Easter egg at the end, there must have been 2,000 people who worked on this film. Film cost $200 million. And I see visual design Sweden, and it's 40 people.
You sure?
AI is going to take that down to 4 people. So what are you going to have? Warner or whoever produced the Fantastic Four is going to put out, instead of 1 movie at 200 million, 5 at 20 million, using 5% of the workforce, more diversification. The people on the front end of the screen will still make as much money, but you're going to have an incredible destruction in the means of production in terms of the labor itself. But what will happen though is that actually the markets will go up, because if you think about what AI is, the best way for me to describe AI somewhat is corporate Ozempic, and that is what do semaglutides do? They turn off the signal in your brain that you need to eat more to keep growing.
Mm-hmm.
And the signal in every CEO's brain is that as long as I'm increasing my revenues, I need to hire more people. And there was a seminal earnings announcement 3 quarters ago where Meta CEO Zuckerberg said, okay, we grew revenues 23%, and we did it with 20% fewer employees. If he'd announced first we laid off 20% of our employees, the natural inclination would be, oh my God, he's about to shit the bed in terms of his earnings. So AI has basically said to people, and no one says this out loud, but this is what's happening in boardrooms. How do we have the great taste of reduced headcount without the calories of reduced revenues? So you're going to see an explosion in profits. I think you will see the markets continue to hit highs, which, by the way, is not a good thing. I think the most damaging metrics in Western society right now are the Dow and the NASDAQ, because they give this cold comfort that things are all right. All the Dow and the NASDAQ are is a wealth index in the top 10%. And spoiler alert, they're killing it and reaching new all-time highs every day. But if you don't already own stocks, you're trying to make your career, you don't already own a home, things are going to get, I think, tougher and tougher out there in terms of employment opportunities.
That's a question about AI that sort of rule of thumb. Anything that can be digitized and thrown into an AI is going to wreak great destruction. I mean, we're about to see that white and gray collar sector, whether it's actuaries or CPAs or lawyers, or any number of educators in a lot of places, those jobs are going to get blown out, because I think that there will be, I think it's a weird pincer. Those things are going to happen, and the impacts of things like the big beautiful bill with its long-term transfer of wealth. I think simultaneously we're about to have a real hollowing out of that path of aspirational middle and upper middle class folks in this country.
Yeah, there's a few things there. One, if you look at every technology in history, the arc is short-term job destruction, and then you come up, automation was going to wreck the employment sector and the automotive sector, the automation. And what we found is in the short term, lost some jobs on the shop floor, but we anticipate heated seats or car stereos. We took those additional profits, innovated, and actually now there's more people employed in the global auto industry. There is a really good argument that AI, if it follows the track of every other technology for the medium and long term, will create new opportunities in healthcare, new services that might actually grow employment for the people who understand AI. And I'm not as much of an AI bear in terms of societal disruption. What we have decided, though, is that we're purposely, the incumbents will say network effects, agility, globalization, to blame it on income inequality. Income inequality is a function of choices we have made. And that is when we start with this tariff nonsense and we create taxation, insecurity, inability to plan the business, what part of the economy is the tariffs fucking with the most? It's the 70% of our great American companies like Caterpillar, P&G, Ford. Mm-hmm. Who's left out of this mess and gets to run flat out and aggregate even more and more power?
Silicon Valley.
Microsoft, Alphabet, Meta. They just reported, again, record revenues, because guess what? They're not distracted with all this bullshit. And if you were going to have some sort of legislative policy or executive action, and you thought, okay, I've got to transfer value from one type of company to another, would you choose to extract value from the 593 non-Magnificent Seven companies and give even more capital? Meta and Alphabet, since 4 p.m. yesterday, have added $550 billion in market capitalization. And quite frankly, I don't want to say they don't need it, but basically every really talented person, all of human capital, all of financial capital, is just sort of throwing up arms saying, I cannot predict what's going to happen to Ford. I don't know what the input costs are going to be for P&G with this tariff nonsense. I'm just throwing everything in on Meta, and these companies
go into the FANGs, the Golden Seven, all that.
100%. And by the way, that is, you think, well, okay, other than being, class warfare, Scotty, you don't like tech, whatever. you now have the S&P is 50% of the world's market cap. And 40% of that market cap is 7 companies.
Okay.
That is dangerous. There's a string that if you pull on a string that could unwind the global economy, it's if NVIDIA pukes its numbers or a big company's announced that AI is not paying off the way they'd hoped.
Right.
Because if you add up all of the value of equity plus debt enterprise value, American companies represent 70% of global value. And a disproportionate amount of that value is tied up in companies where the market has said they can't spend enough on AI. And as long as they keep spending, I think Microsoft spent more. Here's a crazy stat. According to the Wall Street Journal, this most recent GDP report, companies spent more on AI CapEx this quarter than consumers spent in America. So take all the money all consumers are spending on Lululemon and Starbucks, and big tech spent more money on the CapEx going into AI.
That's insane. And I know that, Zuckerberg wants to build a data center the size of Manhattan, and he's talking weirdly about Mark Zuckerberg, and maybe you can understand this better than I can, because there is some strange niche in Silicon Valley that allows certain weird personality types who are disconnected from human life in some fundamental ways. But Mark Zuckerberg is an astounding businessman. Astounding businessman. The other interesting part of this, and maybe this is the hype cycle in AI, I don't know, but when he's out offering people comp packages to join Meta AI that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars for these AI coders and experts, I feel like we're entering. We're either at the very peak of the hype cycle right now, or this CapEx and this personnel expenditure on all these companies is about to pay them off, and it creating trillionaires, not billionaires.
The market behave. If I've been on a bunch of boards, whenever people are behaving unusually, I'm like, look at the compensation structure. Incentives drive behavior, and the incentive in the marketplace is the following. Larry Ellison owned 24% of Oracle when he founded it. He now owns 41%. Well, how has he been able to do that? They, for the last 20 years, have taken their profits and bought ship. 2 years ago, he said, no, this is a capital war. And the more money we spend investing in infrastructure and CapEx, the market will reward us. And now he's the second wealthiest man in the world because he was a brilliant business strategy. He pivoted to over-investing in AI. The market loves it when Microsoft invests $30 billion in CapEx in 1 quarter in AI, which I think right now, Rick, other than countries during wartime, these organizations are investing more money than any organizations have invested in any one thing in history. The real danger of AI, look, there'll be some job destruction. I'm less pessimistic than most people. I think that I think technology creates additional margin, additional opportunities. I think healthcare and AI could create a ton of high-paying good jobs that become sentient. I've never bought that. I'm not a philosophy major, but there's always a kill switch or someone behind the button, right?
Right.
Self-healing weapons. I don't see any reason why AI couldn't be used for defensive measures as well as offensive. The thing we're not talking about that is really, in my opinion, the biggest threat, and it goes to what Mark Zuckerberg, is that I think the biggest threat that faces us right now is loneliness. And you have the deepest pocketed, most well-resourced companies in history who have one mission, and that's to convince young people, mostly young men, that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen with an algorithm. And what are they doing? 50% of men 18 to age 24 have never approached a woman and asked her out on a date. People are having less sex. That 40% of all bars and nightclubs in London have shut down. 50% of time with friends, the kids in high school, has gone away. Mm-hmm. And what happens is we become less mammalia, and we don't develop the skills to engage not only socially, but economically. And what I think we're evolving, and AI is only going to speedball it, my thesis is we're evolving a new species of asocial, asexual male. And if you look at the most unstable societies in the world, they have one thing in common. They have lonely, broke men that don't have a lot of purpose. And I think AI is going to speedball that.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I was reading a long piece the other day about the rise of these young men with these AI girlfriends, these AI companion bots that are using generative AI and using using LLMs to provide them with a simulation of a companion, and it is not. It breaks that fundamental human and, as you said, mammalian thing. That's not a person. That's not a partner. That's not a mate. That's not somebody you can lay in bed at night with and then have children with. And that I wonder how much social media, which is it's fundamentally changed our politics and our media and our earned media, our press. I wonder how much a society can survive of that, Scott. I mean, what percentage can we get to before not only the population drop off happens, but the social instability becomes so pronounced with those lonely young guys?
It's a really interesting question, and I think about this a lot. But only 1 in 3 men under the age of 30 has a girlfriend. It's 2 in 3 women.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because women are dating older because they want more economically and emotionally viable men. And you just worry, okay, if you aren't developing those skills and you're kind of slowly but surely sequestering from society,
right?
You wake up at 30. If a man hasn't been in a relationship or cohabitated with someone, married even, or cohabitated by the time they're 30, there's a 1 in 3 chance they're going to be a substance abuser. So it's,
sure,
we have the most, quite frankly, who cares if the NASDAQ's hitting all-time highs? If our kids are the most anxious, obese, and depressed generation in history, that's the whole shooting match. Like, where's the indices on that? All this other stuff doesn't really matter. So I think that, I would like to see, I'm really hoping, as I'm sure you are, advising some Democratic, mandatory national service, more vocational programming, redshirting young men so they're a year older going into school, more men teaching in public schools. I am very worried. I think that this election it was supposed to be a referendum on women's rights. Women's rights did not show up. It was a referendum on failing young men. And there's still a lot of women in America who will vote for what they believe is best, their perceived best interests of their husbands and their sons. And the two groups that I think pivoted hard from blue to red were young people, specifically young men, who don't feel like they're doing well and just want change, and 45 to 64-year-old women. And my thesis is that's their mothers. Because if your son's in the basement,
I know that.
If your son's in the basement playing video games and vaping, you don't give a shit about territorial sovereignty in Ukraine or transgender rights. You just know your son isn't doing well, and you don't want to be incumbent, regardless of how bad he is. He's chaos, he's disruption, he's change. But I see this, if you think about the most important things in your life, it all comes back to relationships and friendships and skills usually garnered in your 20s. And these companies
100%.
are trying to convince people that they don't need to develop those skills.
That swing that we saw in this election, where when you add up the numbers, it's about 15 million voters, young Hispanic men, young African American men, white men 18 to 45, they had a massive move towards Trump.
Yeah.
And I on the one hand, I feel depressed about that because it's like you hope that people have better judgment. But on the other hand, young men especially, they are driven by that flush of testosterone, that period of their lives where there is still impulsivity. There is still, the love of transgression that's sort of wired into you genetically and biologically at that age. And Trump was transgression. He was the loud guy. He was the asshole. He was the big dick in the room. And they said, you know what? I'm sick of being told I'm dumb. I'm slower than girls. I'm sick of being told that I'm the problem. And so they went with, they'll go with the bad idea rather than people who call them and treat them like villains. I mean, the Democratic Party, Scott, they had a page on their website of every coalition under the sun.
You're like stealing my thunder. Who we serve.
I know. The lesbian Wiccan drum coalition, but nothing for young men.
70. I added up that list. It's 74% of America. And when you explicitly say you're advocating for 74% of America, you're not advocating for 74%. You're discriminating against the 26%. And that 26% are young men. And Trump flew right into the manosphere. Think about what he did.
Oh, yeah.
Rockets, Joe Rogan, crypto. Him going on Rogan.
Wrestling,
WWE,
MMA, right?
Calling people names. I mean, the whole Hulk Hogan. It was like it smelled like testosterone. And when he went on Rogan, 40 million video views, 15 million audio downloads. For Vice President Harris to have garnered an equivalent amount of attention, she would have had to have gone on MSNBC, CNN, and Fox every night for 3 hours for 2 weeks. So unless it was going to take her 2 weeks to get to Austin and back, she miscalculated. She should have gotten down there.
Big cultural miss. But that idea, it's one of my like sort of back of the envelope political rules. If you tell somebody they're a villain enough times, or you tell somebody you don't give a shit about them enough times, they will listen to you. Yeah. They will say, okay, and they'll look for something else. And I don't think a lot of Democrats, I've been trying to counsel them on this particular branding disaster. I had a important Democratic donor recently say to me, well, what if we say we're going to set up job training for all these young men? I'm like, it's a brilliant policy idea, but it's not going to do anything because they don't believe you. You've told them for years you don't care about them. You've told them for years girls are more important to you. You've told them for years they're the one minority you don't give a shit about. If you don't tell them you care about them first and show them, I don't think it matters what windmill retraining or solar panel installer bullshit you try to sell them. You can't have the cultural dislike of young men.
Well, the far right, to their credit, recognized the problem early. They said our young men are doing well and we should celebrate our young men. I mean, the risk aggressiveness that you're talking about, the impulsivity, the willingness. I mean, quite frankly, when Russian soldiers come pouring over the border in Ukraine, you want some of that big dick energy. Men built the Empire State Building and the Hoover Dam, and the greatest alliance in history is not NATO or Blue Dog Democrats and Rockefeller Republicans. The greatest alliance in history is men and women. And a combination of masculine and feminine energy is the greatest alchemy in history. You want a household with nurturing, grace, ability to read the room, what typically not always people born as women bring it in greater proportion. You also want big picture aggression and a little bit of like ready, fire, aim. The Carnegie Foundation gives 80 awards a year. It's like the Burning Car Award. People who randomly put their own well-being at risk to save someone else. Of the 80 they gave out last year, 76 were men. Men make stupid decisions that are oftentimes very heroic. And
no question.
But leaning into how important young men are, celebrating them, not pathologizing them. The far right has incorrectly, in my view, conflated masculinity with coarseness and cruelty. Cruelty is the point. It's macho to weaponize, have your own private army, put masks on them, have them put their knees on the head of people working at Home Depot. That is not masculinity. At the same time, the far left has said, oh, here's our advice for men, act more like women. That's not the answer either.
It's a broken idea.
So to be something, there's a huge opportunity. I would like the Democrats to seize it, sort of an updated vision of masculinity, but also lean into strength, lean into fitness, lean into aggression. Yeah. One of the reasons and there's some strategy here, I'm really profane on my podcast. One, I'm genuinely and authentically a profane person, but two, I'd like the left to take back profanity because we have become so sensitive that we can't rib each other. We can't affectionately. Right. One of the things I love about my co-host, Kara Swisher, I'm constantly making fun of her sexual orientation. She's constantly making fun of mine.
Right.
And when a white male drops lesbian jokes like, oh, go raise your German Shepherd or where's your Subaru or whatever, and she pauses and then laughs, it gives everyone permission to laugh. And they know that if they listen to the podcast, we're both like pretty progressive and into equal opportunity, but that's no excuse for not enjoying each other and ribbing each other based on our differences. And the left has become so fucking sensitive. And Bill Maher summed it up correctly. No one ever gets canceled for being too woke. And I also think there needs to be a movement on the left, and someone needs to have kind of their sister soldier moment and come out and say, you know what? If someone says something stupid or offensive, then call them stupid and offensive. But let's stop linking that to calls to ruin their livelihood. Like that's a new phenomena. Sequoia Partners says something stupid about me. Fine, you're an idiot. Right. Don't start calling on pension funds to withdraw their funds from Sequoia and fire this kid. No, leave people's livelihoods alone. Anyway,
the school marm thing on the left has been a weapon in the right's hands for a generation now. The whole fainting couch when someone says the wrong word is as a guy who came from the right, I've tried to help people in the center and on the left understand that America is not, Miss Manners. It is not Miss Pity Pat. It is, we are a big, loud, free nation in a lot of
100%.
ways. And sometimes that expresses itself in ways that the faculty lounge at Columbia might not like as much, but okay, that's who we are. And as I think you and Kara come across on your interactions, like so authentic and engaged with one another as friends and as colleagues. Yes, do I say fuck in the air too often? Maybe, but it's what I say. I try not to have and I think this is a good advice for anybody in social media. Don't be somebody else. Be who you are. I mean, the authenticity thing is real.
For candidates.
Yeah. Oh God. I actually spoke to a bunch of candidates.
Take some risks.
I actually spoke to a bunch of candidates over the weekend in Virginia, and a couple of them were like, "Well, should I go and do these speech training things?" I'm like, "No,
just talk.
No. You've already been brave enough to get in the race. Just go be yourself." Yeah, just talk. Well, Scott Galloway, as always, my friend, you are outstanding. I
go on, Rick.
Several hours in a row. Yes,
go on.
The great dog.
26. How do you feel about 26?
I'm feeling pretty good about 26. This redistricting stuff is noise right now. Yeah. If it gets louder, we have to, take some steps on that. But generically, politically, economically, I think we're moving into a place where Trump has really hurt his own brand, even by this 1 month of chaos he's brought on himself with Epstein. That he can't shake that he can't get that dog off his back. He just can't do it. And I think that, voters are getting a little exhausted at this point. His numbers are now in a danger zone where Joe Biden's were at the same point before 24. That under 30 number is really deadly for a candidate. And Trump's always had a very sticky floor of about 40%. He's now below that in our polling and most everybody else's. Not far, but below it enough. So I feel pretty good about it coming up. A lot of work to do between here and there, but I'm just hoping the Democrats continue. I see some Democrats now that are emerging into the space where they're fighting the war where the war is. They're not trying to raise $25 million to run 3,000 gross rating points of TV at the end. Right. They're like Newsom is doing now. He's playing fuck around on social media. He's having fun with it. People are like, oh, I get that guy. Because that's how they mediate things now. So
I just have a quick question for you. It's a sincere question. A lot of people, I think, have been frustrated with Democrats and frustrated in general that they don't see a real rebel force or resistance.
Yep.
If someone says to you, Rick, I'm upset about what's going on, how do I resist? What do you tell them?
Look, the number one thing is engage. You cannot sit at home and just stare at the screen and go, God, I'm pissed off. It is getting involved with other people. It is getting involved with groups in your area or groups. There are plenty of national grassroots things for people that want to do that kind of thing, the door knocking, the postcarding, the calling. There are plenty of ways for people to get involved with supporting candidates in their states. There are groups like ours, like Lincoln Project, that get people involved and help direct them into campaign stuff. All of this together, it gets back to something we kind of disconnected from in this country. We thought civic engagement was joining a Facebook group. It's not. It still means you have to go out in the real world, in the big room, as I call it, with the blue ceiling every day, and meet people, talk to people, engage with people. And I often tell people that you will feel better when you start talking to humans. You will feel better about your politics and your life when you start communicating with people, because they feel frustrated. They're like, how do I craft the perfect tweet to change the dynamic? You don't. You have to go out in the world. Interaction with human beings still is the sort of the gold standard of everything.
Agree.
So, well, Scott Galloway, I appreciate you as always.
You need to be fearless, my brother.
The best. Thank you. One setting, and that is fearless.
There you go. We're going to be dead soon. It doesn't matter, right?
Exactly.
Why not?
No, I'm not living in the cloud.
Yeah, I hear you. Thanks again, Rick.
Thanks, man. All right.